May I have your attention, please? So we are starting now with the works of the panel 2, Communities in Movement, the Italian-British diaspora from Picinisco and the Comino Valley between roots, tourism, and literary representations. I believe that the introductory remarks this morning have been very inspiring for our different sessions today and the following days. And I have the privilege of chairing or moderating this panel. And by way of my introductory remarks, I would say very briefly that this is my first event in connection with the Italian Minister of Foreign Affairs, of which I've been part for more than 37 years. And after 4 years after my retirement, I'm here as member of the board of directors of the Museo Italiano dell'Immigrazione, MEI. And I realized that this is a very, very important and interesting event worth being publicized beyond the attention of scholars and specialists. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Giuseppe Vitale, who's going to talk to us about routes and renewal, the intercultural ties between Picinisco and Britain. We have 15 minutes for your intervention, and please, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and I would like to thank the organizers of this wonderful event for accepting our panel. So without any further ado, today I'm going to present a paper about the historical and intercultural heritage between Picinisco, a small mountain village in southeastern Lazio, and Britain, and to illustrate the possible ways and strategies to promote and transmit this unique legacy. The relations between Picinisco and Britain started at the end of the 19th century, so right after the unification of Italy, when the first inhabitants of the village migrated across the English Channel to face the challenges generated by the unification of our country. And today, a new counter wave of migration has seen descendants returning to Picinisco, fueling roots tourism and also investment in local businesses to reconnect with the family history, roots, and heritage. So the PhD project that I am now conducting is part of the so-called Municipal Doctorate Scholarship. This is one of the actions promoted by the National Agency for Territorial Cohesion as part of the National Strategy for Inner Areas. So this is a governmental policy that started a decade ago to prevent small municipalities of inner areas from demographic, social, cultural and economic crisis by valorizing their historical, naturalistic and artistic heritage. And in 2014, Comino Valley in Lazio was included among these areas. In particular, the municipality of Picinisco was interested in this type of doctorate scholarship and project because of its rich intercultural, artistic and literary connections with the United Kingdom. And starting from 2022, the University Partenope of Naples, where I'm studying, and the municipality signed an agreement to start a research project as part of the PhD course in linguistic, terminological and intercultural studies. So the history of the diaspora from Ciociaria started at the end of the 19th century, so right after the unification of Italy. And for the most part, the Ciociari migrants settled in the English capital in London. Upon their arrival, they were, for the most part, under the control of a padrone. Padroni were compatriots who had long migrated to the United Kingdom, where they'd become respected figures to whom, in exchange for employment and protection, Italian migrants were forced to give up part of the little money they earned, working primarily as street musicians or models for English sculptors and artists. The type of migration that they fueled was called chain migration, a migration process through which established migrants in Britain acted as intermediaries to the fellow villagers in search of better living conditions to facilitate their entry into the country and also to find employment and housing. Starting from the 20s and 30s of the 20th century, Ciociari migrants and those from Picinisco started a second wave domestic migration from London to large Scottish and Welsh urban areas to find better living conditions. To get a gist of the figures of the Italian community from Picinisco in Britain at the turn of the 20th century, the 1933 British census provides interesting figures. As you can see from this table, Italian migrants from Picinisco in 1933 comprised 32% of Edinburgh's community, 9% of Glasgow's, and 20% of Swansea's in Wales. In both Scotland and Wales, Piciniscani and Ciociari worked in the catering industry as they were able to open their own fish and chip shops, cafes, restaurants, ice cream parlors. The outbreak of the Second World War, however, dramatically changed the fortunes of the Italian living in Britain. And in particular, after the declaration of war on Britain from Italy, the British government classified Italian men aged 16 to 70 as enemy aliens, thus leading to their arrest and deportation to internment camps across the UK, Australia, and Canada. This is also related to one of the most tragic events of the Italian history in Britain during the war, the sinking of the Arandora Star. It was a former passenger ship that on July 2nd, 1940 was mistakenly torpedoed by a German U-boat in the Irish Sea while carrying thousands of Italian, German and Austrian detainees to an internment camp in Canada. During this tragedy, more than 400 Italians died. After the Second World War, a new type of migration known as bulk recruitment emerged. This type of migration was strongly supported by both the Italian and British government, as both governments needed to face the crisis generated by the war. And so, thanks to bilateral labor agreements, the emigration from South Italy was facilitated to Britain. Nowadays, more recently, a new type of migration known as return migration has started. This type of migration involves established members of the Italian-British community who are returning to the villages of their forebears, also to facilitate the opening of new businesses thanks to the expertise they have acquired in Britain. And this phenomenon is also related to roots tourism routes. So the development of routes designed to cater to the specific interests of these returning migrants who wish to embark on journeys across the landscapes of their ancestors and explore the family histories and cultural heritage. The diaspora from Picinisco and the Comino Valley has not only been studied and investigated by historians, because it has recently become the subject of literary and artistic inquiry. In particular, a recent study on the writings of Italian-British migrants has brought to light the first attempt at canonizing this literature. And in particular, stories of love, family, despair, personal growth, self-discovery of men and women, successful people who have lived between two countries, two cultures and two languages, are narrated in this literary and artistic canon of non-professional amateur writers. And also, people from Picinisco, descending from the early migrants from the area, have been found in this narrative canon. Another aspect of the PhD project and this presentation that I am now showing is related to the digital archives. Archives, as you probably know, are places, physical places, where memories of a community are stored and disseminated to preserve a collective memory of a community. And the reason why I'm also focusing on digital archives is because the municipality municipality of Picinisco that I am working with wants to disseminate the research findings through a digital platform available to both a domestic and international audience, and also to as a way to facilitate access and preservation of this study, and in particular as a digital repository for the narratives of the Italian British diaspora from Picinisco and the Valley. So I'm working on digital archives in particular because of the impact of new technologies and scientific innovation. Digital archives are repositories of cultural heritage collections that rely on electronic databases to organize and disseminate information about the past of a community. And according to Ernst, the art of the archive, so a way a digital archive organizes its content, is in particular connected to narrativity and storytelling. So this is also why I'm working on digital stories. So this is the demo version of the new digital archive that I'm proposing as part of my PhD project. As you can see, the title of this demo version is Picinisco Rediscovering Roots, and it is going to be used as a way to engage with the Italian British community from Picinisco in the Comino Valley, in particular in the context of roots tourism, as a resource for individuals seeking to connect with their ancestral roots. The website will provide access to a digital collection of fictional and non-fictional, biographical, autobiographical, written and oral narratives of the diaspora. The archive is organized into these 5 sections: the project, people, stories, places, and more info. I'm going to skip the first part about the project since I've already discussed it. The second part, people, is devoted to the authors of the narratives collected in the PhD corpus that I am building. As you can see from this table, the authors of the archive have been organized according to their origins, since all of them are from Picinisco or the Comino Valley, the hometown in the UK. Most of them, as you can notice, are settled in Edinburgh or Swansea, and in particular also I'm working on different genres, narrative genres, mostly novels, autobiographies, and hybrid texts. The section about the stories is a collection of excerpts extracted from the corpus I am working on. So far, I have identified stories related to childhood memories that narrate how Italian British children remember their past and how they felt while living in an Italian British family. Also, the topic of fear was another common theme that I found in my analysis, as Italian British children were afraid and scared sometimes of the strict patriarchal values of Italian British families. Gratitude as well was a common topic found in corpus analysis, as most of them, as I mentioned before, were able to open and create their own business in the catering industry. So this was this feeling of gratitude and self-awareness, because talking about transnationalism is a common topic in such narratives. So storytelling is also an opportunity for these people to raise more awareness about their self-identities and what being part of a transnational community means to them. Places as well of the diaspora from Picinisco and the Comino Valley have been found in this corpus analysis so far. Picinisco, Edinburgh, and Swansea, so the 3 key locations of the diaspora have been found, and I'm going to focus, since this is a demo version, I'm going to focus on the way these places are represented and narrated in the narrative corpus of my research. And last, Picinisco and the Comino Valley are related to another person of the English 19th to 20th century literature, because Lawrence stayed in Picinisco in 1919-1920 at Orazio Cervi's villa. Cervi was a nobleman from Picinisco who migrated in London at the turn of the 20th century, where he worked as a model for famous sculptures of the time. They met in London, and so he invited Cervi invited Picinisco Lawrence, where he was finally able to complete his novel The Lost Girl, which is set in the last chapters in Pesco Calascio, a village that reminds for its landscape Picinisco and the Comino Valley. Nowadays, the place that you can see from this slide is an agriturismo known as Casa Lawrence, where you can visit and also admire some objects that belong to Lawrence himself, as for example his bed or a letter that he wrote during his stay in Picinisco. So thank you all for the attention, and
we have to thank Giuseppe Vitale for his ultra-rapid overview, yet very exhaustive about roads and renewal and the Picinisco experience. Giuseppe Vitale raised one of the, at the beginning of his presentation, raised one of the points which struck my attention, and that is the chain migration, which I believe is a common experience in many instances of Italians abroad. This brings me back to my memories as consul in France, in Grenoble, where the composition of the Italian community there was made up by 4 distinct groups coming from 4 distant provincial towns in Italy, in southern Italy. And Giuseppe Vitale was also mentioning a book by Manuela D'Amore, who's going to be our next speaker now. Manuela D'Amore is going to touch the point of family histories, genealogies, and heritage, Picinisco and the Comino Valley in the Italian-British narratives of return. You have the floor, please.
I think I would like to stand, perhaps. See if I can. Okay, that should be better. Okay, so thank you for having me. Giuseppe Vitale has shown that Picinisco and the Comino Valley are central to innovative research projects that highlight their strong transnational character. My aim today is to show that also the literary writings of the Italian diaspora in Britain are contributing to a new renaissance of the area, incorporating detailed, often nostalgic descriptions of its beauties and rich traditions. These writings also represent an important step in the construction of the author's identity. This slide shows who they are, where they originally came from, as well as where they settled in Britain. If we consider the background and the late stage in their lives, when they decided to dedicate themselves to writing, we will realize that they not only wanted to share their experience as emigrants, but also to make their heritage visible. And indeed, visibility represents a crucial challenge for the literary dimension of the Italian diaspora in Britain. It was especially during the Second World War that the members of the emigrant community were silenced and marginalized, considering that also in the 1950s and 60s, the younger generations continued to struggle to become integrating and obtain social recognition. We can understand why they began to find their own literary voice since the early 1980s. Those were also the years of their activism and of their commitment to restoring the dignity of the past generations of Italians. This slide shows the writer and activist Paulette Pelosi, who was a leading member of the Arandora Star Memorial Fund in Wales. Originally from Picinisco in the early 2000s, she was following in the footsteps of those first and second generation immigrants who had already reinforced the connection between Italy and Britain. Elizabeth Wren Owens has explained that the Second World War, and especially the tragedy of the Arandora Star, greatly hindered the emergence of an Italian-British literary tradition. It is undeniable, though, that this rich corpus of fiction, non-fiction, verse and drama dedicates important sections to the moments when they or their fictional characters return to their laziale homes, which they propose as a crucial phase in the process of discovery and self-discovery. Technically speaking, only school books in spaghetti paper, the short story which the Italian-Welsh Paulette Pelosi published in 2005 can be defined as a return narrative. The reason why, however, the works by Gagliardo Coraggioso, Anita Arcari, Raffaella Cruciani, and Ann Pia deserve our attention today is that they provide precious information about the past and the rich heritage of the Comino Valley while expressing the complex sense of belonging. I will begin with Gagliardo Coraggioso and his picaresque memoir, Wandering Minstrel. Published in 1938 by Oxford University Press, it represents the first piece of literary prose written by an Italian immigrant. The short extract that you can read on this slide is taken from chapter 16, Italy, Antonio, and Ice Cream, which recounts his return to Picinisco after he had immigrated to London at the age of 10. Interestingly, for the first time, he saw the wilderness of nature as a danger and also realized that there was no chance of progress there. He appreciated Mussolini's interventions in the valley, but knew that, and this is a quotation, it was in his blood to travel. So after 18 months, he left for West Hartlepool to sell ice cream, confectionery, and other things, end quote. The latest ethnographic and sociological research relates to the myth of return in migration narratives to rituals like visits or mundane pilgrimages. This is true for Paulette Pelosi and Anita Arcari. As concerns Gagliardo Coraggioso and Raffaella Cruciani, we can also certainly find a concept of genealogical individualized roots. Obsessed by his traumatic experiences as a victim of the padrone system in Britain when he was only a boy, Gagliardo Coraggioso returned to Picinisco once again and to take revenge of the man who had caused him so much suffering. It was a shock for him to discover that his cruel padrone was actually his biological father. He thus began to think of old good England again, and this is a quotation from the text, and left for good. He became a successful cafe owner in Edinburgh who wanted to express his complex sense of belonging. This extract shows that he was an Italian who was proud of his country, but who equally and deeply admired British people. After a painful internment experience on the Isle of Man, during the Second World War, he died in Rome in 1947. Generally marked, as also Carlo Pirozzi confirms, by a lack of coherence and consistency, Wandering Minstrel is not the only narrative in this literary corpus which associates the return to Picinisco and the Comino Valley to negative feelings such as resentment, shock, and even claustrophobia. Before I speak about Ann Pia's long pilgrimage towards self-acceptance, I will draw your attention to the Hokey Pokey Man and All in the Kitchen, the discovery of my Italian heritage. They propose Picinisco as the place where their authors finally discovered the roots, which was respectively the product of Anita Arcari's and Raffaella Cruciani's journey and tireless documentary research. The extract that you can read on this slide is taken from the preface to The Hokey Pokey Man, the novel which Arcari published in 2010. Although the protagonist's name here is Carla, the narrator is actually recounting Arcari's journey to Picinisco in 2000 and discovery of the house of her grandfather and its nearby Cappella. A mixture of autobiography and fiction, this literary version is highly emotional. We can find evidence that this discovery was a fundamental event in her life in the materials that she uploaded on on the website People's Collections Wales, in this case to redevelopment and recovery interventions, clearly expressed the desire of Italian immigrants to Britain to return to and treasure the past. Arcari thus wanted to include part of the story of a family in a debut novel dedicating the epilogue to the theme of return. Here, the protagonist, Tino d'Abruzzo, pays tribute to his family house in Picinisco after 50 years. There was nothing much left of the farm, and for the first time he could see the Cappella. He wished, and this is a quotation as you can read, that he had the power to turn back the clock, but it was too late. Luckily, on this occasion, he had the opportunity to meet his beloved Mara, which is part of the happy ending of this lengthy but highly engaging novel. Thus, the Okey Pokey Man expresses Arcari's pride in her origins. As we have seen, returning to Picinisco had been decisive for her to reflect on a sense of belonging, an equally touching narrative which takes the shape of our memoir. Raffaella Cruciani's An Hole in the Kitchen, The Discovery of My Italian Heritage, shows how a quest for identity was closely related to a journey to Picinisco and to a long, tireless documentary research. We could symbolically consider the first two chapters, Supposition and Reality, and those elusive Italians as a starting point of her quest. Cruciani speaks in first person and shares the past feelings of frustration at the idea that she knew too little about her father's Italian family. She thus decided to go to Italy, which also gave her the chance to discover that the Comino Valley was an enchanting and also very fertile area. It was, however, after consulting hundreds of parish records that she could trace a gypsy ancestry back to 1565. They all came from Picinisco, Atina, and Villa Latina. They first emigrated to London just after the unification of Italy. This was a large and a huge entertaining for men and women who were unable to speak the language or even read and write in their native tongue, which shows how desperate those times were and how brave and resolute they were. And this is, of course, taken from the memoir. It was, however, easier for her to understand how they arrived in England and where they settled, informing the reader that they also moved to Birmingham and other cities in England. She also shows that their itineraries were in line with the history of the Italian community in England. Respectively published in 2010 and 2016, Arcari and Cruciani depict the Comino Valley and Picinisco in the period 1870-1950. This was their way of going back to the roots and associate the area to a far remote past. We can have a more recent description of its beauty and typical atmosphere in Paulette Pelosi's school books in spaghetti paper. This is a short story and the only piece of literary writing that the Welsh writer and activist has ever written. It recounts the visit to Picinisco and highlights a sense of relief that everything she saw and experienced during those months in 1992 perfectly aligned with her father's stories and memories. Again, we can find a mixture of facts and personal impressions. There is indeed room for the descriptions of the little markets of Atina, a larger centre near Picinisco, as well as the aromas of her grandmother's cuisine. As for the ghosts, which seem to haunt the Pelosi's family house, they reinforce the ancestral character of the culture. This reference in particular reminds us of Hector Emanuele's sense of belonging, which revives the legends of the village of Bardi in the province of Parma, where the Italian-Welsh writer used to return to with his mother and when he was a young boy. Pelosi finishes her short narrative with the prospect of choosing Picinisco as a new home. She doubts that she will ever take that decision, but again, we can understand that this open ending is revealing of a complex sense of belonging. She's strongly attracted to her Italian roots. She's still committed to restoring the dignity of the Italian community, but her home is and will always be Wales, Britain. I'm going to conclude. An enchanting part of southern Lazio, which is historically part of the ancient Terra di Lavoro district. The Comino Valley and Picinisco are mentioned, described, and even evoked by the majority of Italian British writers, 1/3 of them all. Written between 1938 and 2023, the narratives, also the praise and verse, incorporate continuous references to the beauties, rich traditions, and backwardness of the area. More importantly, though, they propose them as icons of the complicated sense of belonging. The extract that you can read on this slide, and which is taken from Magnaccioni, My Food, My Italy, epitomizes the shift in Ann Pier's writing from the image of Viticuso as an unfamiliar book that she and her daughters had briefly opened years before, to a new and deeper sense of connection also with the local population. In 2023, after such a long period of time, for the first time, she defined them as a people. And thank you very much for your attention.
Grazie, Manuela D'Amore. I understand that Mrs. Pelosi is still alive and active, yes, and well, that's a very remarkable story, and especially for her efforts in remembering the victims of the sunken ship, the Arandora, sinking in 1940, which I had very vague memories, and it was important to remember that today.
Yeah, absolutely.
And now our next speaker would be Raffaella Antinucci on the topic Representing and Reshaping Cultural Hybridity, Italian Scottishness in Mary Contini's Trilogy. The subject was evoked in the first intervention of Giuseppe Vitale. You have the floor. Yes.
Using this microphone. Good morning, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank also on behalf of all the speakers in this panel, the organizers of the conference and the May movie for having accepted our panel proposal. And also I'd like to thank publicly the municipality of Picinisco and the owners of Casa Lorenz because they made possible this collaboration with Partenope University in Naples for the institution I am working for, and also the PhD project carried out by Giuseppe Vitale. So Giuseppe Vitale's and Manuela D'Amore's talks were perfect prefaces and introductions to my talk. Now I'm focusing on one of these writers, Italian-Scottish writers, within the corpus of these Italian-Scottish works illustrated by Manuela D'Amore. And the case is a Mary Contini's production. Mary Contini is a second-generation Italian Scot, born Mary di Ciacca, and is the granddaughter of Italian immigrants who moved from Picinisco to Cowcansey, a small fishing village on the east coast of Scotland, not far from Edinburgh, at the beginning of the last century. She worked in her family businesses, an ice cream shop and a fish and chip shop from an early age, before studying biology at Edinburgh University. As it frequently happened in the Italian communities abroad, in 1979, she married Philip Contini, another Italian Scot whose family came from Fontitune, a hamlet near Picinisco again, a maiden name as a chef and leading cookery author. Since 1983, she has been the co-director of the famous Italian food and wine emporium Valvona in Crolla in Edinburgh, which was established by her husband Philip's grandfather, Alfonso Crolla. Okay, you can see it here, okay, on the top right, in 1934. In 1995, Contini began writing for Scottish newspapers. She appeared on television and radio, and also her passion for Italian food has resulted in the writing of cookery books, children's book, and a trilogy of novels, Dear Francesca, Dear Olivia, and Dear Alfonso, dedicated to members of her family, her two daughters, Francesca and Olivia, and her husband's grandfather, Alfonso Crolla, respectively. Her fiction and the research she did to write the three novels earned her public recognition. In 2010, she was conferred the honor of Cavaliere dell'Ordine della Stella della Solidarietà Italiana for her services to Italy and to Italians abroad, and in 2020, she was awarded a British OBE, quote, for services to the Scottish food industries and for Scottish-Italian relations. So from both a literary and historical points of view, Contini's books have received very little critical attention. The only exception, of course, is Manuela d'Amore's monograph. Nevertheless, in its attempt to retrace her author's ancestors' journey from the village of Picinisco to Scotland, Contini's trilogy not only turns out to be a mine of historical and sociological information, but also exhibits features that are certainly worth a further investigation. They affect narration at different levels relating to genre, the paratext, focalization, and language. From their very content, the three books compose a coherent whole, serving the function of narrating and handing down for future generations the main past events that brought three Italian families, the Di Ciaccas, the Crollas, and the Silnis, from Picinisco and Pozzuoli to Scotland, and led their personal stories to cross and intertwine, eventually forming Contini's family heritage. From a diegetical point of view, the trilogy thus embodies the attempt at reconstructing piece after piece, the vicissitudes of both Mary Contini and her husband's Italian ancestors on the backdrop of Italian migration and the two world conflicts. Indeed, the jigsaw seems a fitting metaphor for a Contini's trilogy, one that the author herself evokes in the prefatory letter to her daughter Olivia at the beginning of Dear Olivia, when she describes her goal and strategy. I have pieced together their experiences and have tried to imagine what it must feel like and how life would have been. This is the final piece of the jigsaw, the untold part of your heritage that illuminates the past. In this respect, Contini's trilogy reads like a family saga, with Dear Olivia and Dear Alfonso centered around the lives of Contini's husband's ancestors, his maternal grandparents, the Crollas, and his father, Carlo Contini, respectively, and Dear Francesca telling the success story of the other's paternal grandparents, Cesidio and Marietta Di Ciacca, and how it intersected with her husband's maternal grandparents, Alfonso and Maria Crolla, of their migration to Scotland and integration into the local community, of their thriving catering businesses in Cockenzie and Edinburgh, respectively, and of their mutual support. Dear Francesca thus sets not only the tone and the style, but lays the very foundation for the other two novels. Tellingly, a two-page family tree, which details Mary Contini and her husband's ancestry, stands out in Dear Francesca immediately after the table of contents. The family tree is only one of the many paratextual elements through which Contini attempts both to validate the authenticity of her narrative and convey the perception of an accurate and comprehensive reconstruction of past times and atmosphere. The numerous family pictures, vintage print ads, old letters, and the final bibliography, which lists the historical sources she used apart from family recollections, add to the veracity of a narrative space where individual stories and the collective history meet. The result is a composite text whose genre is difficult to determine and whose status as a novel is further undermined by the pervasive presence of recipes, especially in Dear Francesca. Apart from being an essential cultural component of many immigrants communities, in the case of the Italian Scottish, including Contini, food and eating practices are at the center of both their family and professional lives. In textual terms, the recipes are given primacy from the first page, in which the contents are organized as a complete Italian meal, with chapters titles that run from antipasta to drinks, each one referring to a course or to healthy eating habits, and one devoted to food consumed on special occasions, titled Traditions, Feasts, and Fasts. Likewise, it is very difficult to disentangle the more narrative parts from the recipes, which in some cases are not written in the standard layout, with the list of ingredients at the top and ensuing instructions, but are organized in paragraphs and interwoven with anecdotes and recollections, further blurring the lines between the textual genres. So Contini is able to weave different and differing voices into the textual fabric and articulate not only a communal narrative, but also an Italian-Scottish communal meal. Food metaphors are extensively used both in the titles of chapters and sections and in the more narrative parts. The very content of the first part of the book, which narrates the youth of the De Crollas and the De Ciaccas in Picinisco, is followed by the section on the basic simple ingredients that will be employed in all the recipes, aglio, olio, peperoncino, pan, and so on, suggesting a strong link between family and food heritage. So the kind of heteroglossia in Bactinian terms used by Contini in Dear Francesca and especially in Dear Olivia also entails linguistic hybridity, as standard English and Italian are interspersed with Picinisco and Pozzuoli dialects and with Scots. The author's transnational and hybrid identity, similarly to that of all the people evoked in her novels, the in-betweenness of the immigrant condition, be it first, second, or third generation, as in the case of Contini, is stated from the very first page of Dear Francesca. When Contini says, "When I was young, I felt I had no heritage. Our family had no roots. As a daughter of an Italian immigrant living in a small Scottish community, I was different from my friends. As a child, you felt the same. When asked at the tender age of 6 if you were Italian or Scottish, you said with huge insight, I feel Italian when I'm in Scotland and Scottish when I'm in Italy." This cultural difference, which the other narrator experienced as a child as rootedness, constantly feeling out of place in both countries, later in all the books turns out to be a source of personal and social enrichment. In Omi Baba's terms, the hybrid identities staged in Contini's books, including their authors, serve as agents of change and resistance against any form of ideology and fanatical nationalism. The conclusion of Contini's prefatory letter to her daughter Olivia reads, "You must resist prejudice and always search for the truth. I hope their story will inspire you to be optimistic and hardworking and to reach for great things. I want you to learn to love and respect them and be as proud of them as I am." Indeed, it can be said that the stories told in the pages of Dear Olivia all revolve around pride and prejudice, two words that, used in the quotation, recur in Contini's book. The author herself defines the nature of her narrated mother in oppositional terms. "I've heard stories of courage," I'm quoting, "faith and love, of prejudice, disaster, and loss." Of course, these elements are inherent to human condition, but they affect the migrants' lives to a higher degree. So the stories of the Crollas and the De Ciaccas hover between success, in spite of many difficulties and discrimination, proud and proudly are very frequently adopted to refer to the first and second generation immigrants' attitude towards their culture of origin. I'm quoting, "They were Italians, after all, they were proud and loyal." Also, proud their involvement in the First World War, quote, "proud that they had fought with the Italians, the British, and the French to preserve peace in Europe," end of quote, and especially of their economic achievement as owners of thriving businesses, gradually becoming part of the local community. So I'm not reading the quotation. It's interesting that the process of assimilation of Italian immigrants into the Scottish society seems to have been different in a small place like Cockenzie compared to the urban context of Edinburgh. This distinction emerges in a telling dialogue between Marietta di Ciacca and Maria Crolla. I understand that it's different for you living in Edinburgh. Down here in Cockenzie, it is so much easier. We are part of the Scottish community. They call Cecidio sis and me Mary Coppola, if you don't mind. Maria laughed. Alfonso was called Mr. Crolla in the shop in Valvona and Crolla in Edinburgh, or Tally Bastard, depending on the time of night. End of quote. So in many ways, life and social relationships in Cockenzie resemble the close community of Picinisco, favoring the Di Ciacca's integration, whereas in a city like Edinburgh, it was more difficult to win the diffidence of the local population. Unfortunately, as also Giuseppe recalled, the Second World War marked a watershed in the history of the Italian community in Scotland, not only because of the sinking of the Arandora Star and its lasting consequences, because when Italy entered the war on the side of Germany on the 10th of June 1940, thousands of male Italians were rounded up, regardless of their political allegiances and how long they have lived in Britain, to be interned as enemy aliens under Churchill's policies, colored the lot. At the same time, anti-Italian riots broke up across Britain. In Edinburgh, mobs of thousands of people smashed and looted Italian cafes and fish and chip shops, while many Italo-Scots were verbally and physically attacked. Valvona and Crolla was no exception. So simply reading the first part, by the time Michael reached Elmero, it was too late. The tall Georgian windows of the shop were completely destroyed. The bottles that had been so proudly displayed, again proudly, lay smashed on the ground. Red wine, like a river of blood, flowed down Leith Walk. So overnight, to be Italian had become something to be ashamed of. And quote, I quote, I'm ashamed, I can't imagine Italy fighting against us, end of quote, comments Cecidio. Both Cecidio di Ciacca and Alfonso Crolla died on the Arandora, and their business were taken over by their wives and children. After the war, it was thanks to their work in the catering industry that the Italian Scot community was integrated in the local society, ultimately playing a crucial role in Scottish society. Italian Scottishness was reshaped one more time. Johnny di Ciacca, Contini's father, yes, although, quote, raised 8 children as strictly as an Italian father would, trying to instill his heritage and ancient relations, was always proud to have been accepted by the locals as Inayu, one of us in Scots. It is also noteworthy that Marietta di Ciacca, Nonna Caffè, as she was known in the family, quote, learned how to cook Scottish recipes from the friends she made in Cockenzie, end of quote. The Hogmanay dinner was, quote, a strange mixture of Scottish and Italian traditional festive food, including Nonna's pizza, ham and egg pie, prawn cocktail, and so on, and also a whole side of Scottish white smoked salmon, smoked by James Dickinson, the local fishmonger. Thanks to its Scottish contamination, food becomes the contact zone par excellence between the two cultures, showing the extent to which the Italian component, or the Italian factor, as Terry Colpi would call it, influenced local foodways and social life, contributing to modern Scottishness. Last quotation. So the Italian Scots, small shops and cafes became the focus of life for the community after the war. In towns and villages all over Scotland, the local chip shop was the place where gossip was exchanged, youngsters congregated, and die-hard drinkers tottered in last thing at night for the tea. The Italians steadily became respected friends and confidants to the locals, end of quote. So to conclude, as part of a corpus of Italian-Scottish literary canon, Contini's trilogy epitomizes not so much or not only the in-between condition of second and third generation immigrants, but rather the articulation of a new and complex sense of transnational identity, whereby the retelling of our ancestor story of migration from Picinisco to Scotland becomes a deliberate act of cultural assertion. In the interplay between the past and present dimensions, and especially in the passages where the authorial voice emerges, Italianness, or better, Italian Scottishness, is represented in movement from a potential source of discrimination to a modern identity component to be proud of. Thank you.
Grazie, Raffaella Antinucci. What a story. I believe that Dear Olivia is going to be a book that we might think reading sooner or later. It's certainly in my case. There was one quote to put it on a lighter note that I would like to make is when I read the menu, it was not very different from many Italian restaurants menus abroad, you know, in the Anglo-American world. But what the word that struck me most was antipasta instead of antipasto, meaning that you have no choice. After this, there will be pasta for sure. Our last speaker today in this panel is Luca Leone, la Terza Generazione, alla Riscoperta dell'Identità italiana.
Buongiorno a tutti.
You have the floor.
Un ringraziamento al Presidente Paolo Masini per l'invito e una cortesia perché avevo preparato l'intervento, però avendo avuto delle sollecitazioni dagli interventi, posso chiedere una cortesia alla Professoressa D'Amore, quella mappa della Valle di Comino? Sì. Solo quella. Allora io sono
dovrebbero fare ritornare la presentazione in modo tale che io
sì,
possa arrivare alla slide.
Per la regia, se fosse possibile, la presentazione della Professoressa D'Amore. Grazie mille. Io sono Luca Leone, sono responsabile del museo del...
Perfetto. No, proprio...
del Novecento e della Shoah di San Donato Val di Comino. E poi tra i vari impegni collaboro con il Museo dell'Olocausto di Washington, un museo federale che si occupa chiaramente di memoria relativa alla Seconda Guerra Mondiale. Avendo allestito il Museo del Novecento e della Shoah, ci siamo resi conto che la questione relativa all'immigrazione sandonatesi, la Valle di Comino all'estero, era qualcosa di molto interessante. Quindi quando abbiamo sviluppato proprio il museo, è stato un museo fatto tra il 2021 e il 2022, ci siamo resi conto che a livello di percorso espositivo andava fatto qualcosa di diverso. Poi avendo la collaborazione con gli studiosi del museo, noi ci occupiamo prevalentemente di memoria orale, quindi la scientificità delle interviste fatte ai sopravvissuti. Quindi loro già avevano fatto le interviste ai sopravvissuti ai campi di sterminio, poi sono venuti in Valle di Comino perché San Donato è stata la più importante località di internamento libero per ebrei stranieri del Lazio, una delle più importanti d'Italia. Quindi abbiamo intervistato tutte le persone anziane che hanno avuto delle relazioni con questi internati. Più c'erano delle internate politiche. Calcolate che ci troviamo nella Valle di Comino e queste montagne che voi vedete qui tra San Biagio, Villa Latina, Belmonte Castello, lì praticamente passava la linea Gustav. Faccio questa premessa perché il concetto della guerra è importante, perché è una cesura importante soprattutto per il fatto poi dell'emigrazione e del museo. Tecnicamente che succede? Immaginate oggi l'Ucraina, una città tipo Bakhmut oppure tipo Kharkiv, dove si combatte da 5, 6, 7, 10 mesi, pure di più. Questa parte qui praticamente c'è una cesura, da questa parte i tedeschi, sotto gli alleati e il Regno d'Italia. Quindi la Valle di Comino era retrovia logistica, quindi c'erano dei reparti di elite, c'era tutto un discorso e c'era proprio la retrovia operativa. La prima, loro arrivano già alla fine di settembre, inizio ottobre 43, arrivano i tedeschi e militarizzano e predispongono tutto. Il primo viene costruita la linea Gustav e poi verso gennaio inizia il primo tentativo di sfondamento della linea Gustav. Il primo tentativo è l'accerchiamento da questa parte, quindi viene bombardato e raso al suolo tutto il centro storico di Atina e il centro storico di Picinisco. Poi questa azione viene respinta dalle truppe tedesche, un po' per fortuna anche del territorio, perché erano truppe americane e truppe coloniali francesi. Poi quelle truppe coloniali, gli inglesi le fecero spostare sugli Aurunci e poi sugli Aurunci, quando sfondarono la linea Gustav da quella parte lì, ebbero le 40 ore di libertà e fecero 10.000 donne, quello che poi avete visto nel romanzo La Ciociara, che in realtà è molto limitato rispetto a quello che è successo. Successivamente poi il fronte si sposta da quest'altra parte e ci stanno vari combattimenti, quindi questa è la prima fase. La Valle di Comino rimane 8 mesi dietro la retrovia tedesca, questo significa tanti bombardamenti alleati, tanti morti dai civili e soprattutto è l'unica, la più cruenta battaglia della campagna d'Italia, che tra feriti, morti, alleati eccetera ha fatto oltre 250.000 vittime e soprattutto l'unica battaglia della seconda guerra mondiale dove ci sono stati più di 11 eserciti che si sono combattuti. L'altro passaggio poi qual è importante? Che nelle prigioni in Abruzzo, Marche, Emilia Romagna c'erano le prigioni dove venivano portati da italiani e tedeschi i soldati catturati in Africa da italiani e tedeschi, i soldati a Manuela. Quindi dopo l'8 settembre questi scappano, e parliamo di migliaia di ex prigionieri alleati, e rimangono lungo questo costone, praticamente Settefrati, San Donato, Campoli, e poi praticamente vigilano da questa parte qui. Quindi questa parte qui. La popolazione locale, nonostante tutte le difficoltà, si adopera e aiuta tantissimo questi ex prigionieri alleati. Molti di loro, diciamo gli abitanti della Valle di Comino, essendo stati poi emigrati per esempio nel Regno Unito oppure negli Stati Uniti, parlavano in inglese e quindi questo fu molto molto importante. Calcolate che solo San Donato Val di Comino in quegli 8 mesi ne sono stati aiutati circa 1.000 di ex prigionieri alleati. Poi a loro il generale Alexander, in qualità di comandante delle forze alleate del Mediterraneo, ha dato un attestato chiaramente un attestato di riconoscimento e gratitudine. Quindi dicevo, questo è tutto quello che è successo. E nella Valle di Comino poi abbiamo avuto la ritirata 2 giorni dei tedeschi e poi si sono sparati, diciamo, gli ultimi colpi e poi dopo praticamente la battaglia, diciamo, del Cassinate è finita praticamente in Valle di Comino, quindi con la ritirata tedesca e gli ultimi colpi. Questa è stata una cesura importante. Allora ci siamo resi conto nell'allestimento del museo che la parte qual era? Non era tanto raccontare, perché chiaramente il focus è stato questo, perché è stato qualcosa di molto devastante, interi centri cancellati e intere identità distrutte. Era importante perché mettere insieme il fatto della vita di tutti i giorni delle persone e integrarla con il concetto di guerra totale. Cioè, mentre noi avevamo da questa parte la guerra sul territorio, dal 40 al 44, con lo scoppio della guerra, abbiamo avuto per esempio la Randora Star, l'internamento degli ebrei e poi la questione dell'occupazione. Tutto questo che cosa ha determinato? Che dall'altra parte tanti emigrati venivano arruolati nell'esercito alleato e quindi per esempio hanno combattuto e sono morti, per esempio sbarco in Normandia, lo sbarco d'Anzio eccetera, quindi c'è stato anche quell'aspetto. Guerra totale perché c'era la guerra sul territorio, ma nello stesso tempo molti di loro, molti poi del territorio, o erano deportati in Sudafrica, India, Kenya e in Inghilterra, presi perché chiaramente dopo l'entrata in guerra, in quanto nazioni nemiche, sono stati catturati e quindi portati in altre nazioni. Quindi le persone del posto avevano anche questi parenti che combattevano e erano stati presi. Dopo l'8 settembre tanti di loro vengono presi e poi deportati dai tedeschi nei campi di concentramento in Germania. Quindi questa era la situazione catastrofica. Questo è importante perché poi determinerà tutto un discorso importante nel dopoguerra, perché segnando una cesura il territorio praticamente rimane nel dopoguerra rimane praticamente poverissimo, perché però 8 mesi sul fronte erano state depauperate tutte le risorse, praticamente non c'era praticamente più niente, i bambini che morivano di nutrizione, di fame eccetera. E abbiamo tanti interventi, soprattutto dall'estero, dove le comunità per esempio di Boston, New York, faccio un esempio di San Donato, solo a San Donato Oreste Fabrizi, che era un antifascista anarchico, emigrato nel 23, quindi subito dopo il fascismo, collegato con Salvemini, legato a Sacco e Vanzetti, non viene arrestato perché lui sta fuori dalla panetteria mentre arrestano loro, e lui poi negli anni 70 farà tutto il discorso con il governatore Dukakis per la riabilitazione di Sacco e Vanzetti. Lui che fa? Organizza praticamente con tutta la comunità e fa arrivare a San Donato 880 pacchi per i bambini dai 3 a 12 anni. Interessante poi leggere anche le lettere di risposta della famiglia dove dicono grazie per esempio perché ho potuto dare le scarpe a mio figlio, perché la questione poi della ricostruzione fu qualcosa di veramente drammatico e ci vollero tanti anni. Oppure vi faccio un esempio, solo da New York, dalla comunità di New York arrivarono le medicine per 700 persone, ma medicine significava ovatta, siringhe, un minimo di penicillina praticamente perché non c'era nulla. Quindi questa è la cesura. Poi l'emigrazione, come abbiamo già ascoltato, è stata veramente una diaspora, viene presa sempre come punto di riferimento perché noi abbiamo un'emigrazione che parte già dall'inizio dell'Ottocento, però il nucleo forte è quello fine 800, inizio 900 e abbiamo un'emigrazione che nella prima fase raggiunge per esempio Brasile, Argentina e soprattutto Stati Uniti e già le prime generazioni già si integrano molto. Mi aggancio al concetto della terza generazione. Passaggio diciamo veloce, la prima generazione che fa di italiani all'estero? Andando hanno delle difficoltà pratiche, soprattutto con la comunità irlandese e con la comunità locale e quindi si favorisce molto l'associazionismo. Faccio l'esempio di San Donato, New York, Philadelphia, Quincy, oppure Newton, Boston, sono le comunità che vanno. In quelle comunità vanno chiaramente in base pure alle proprie abilità, al proprio mestiere. Per esempio gli scalpellini andavano a Quincy, che era la città del granito. E succede che andando su quel posto si creano delle associazioni. Faccio un esempio, Philadelphia che è tra le prime, là ci sarà Francesca Saverio Cabrini, che poi sarà la santa degli emigrati, che darà una mano alla comunità e loro costruiranno la chiesa di San Donato e la scuola che oggi è un monumento, avranno la loro banda musicale, cioè creeranno tutta una struttura. Che succede poi? La seconda generazione continua l'attività, spesso nemmeno ritornano perché essendo italo-americani in molti casi si vergognano pure di queste origini. La terza e la quarta generazione invece, questo per esperienza degli ultimi anni, invece ritornano perché vanno alla ricerca di quelle che sono le radici. E quindi la richiesta principale che ci viene fatta è: chi era il capostipite che è emigrato? Posso fotografare la casa dove lui è nato? Oppure per esempio chiedono delle informazioni sull'albero genealogico. Questo però è qualcosa che è successo, è recente degli ultimi anni. Questo per quale motivo? Perché i primi che hanno fatto le associazioni sono morti da qualche anno. Quindi che succedeva? Quando per esempio a San Donato, a Sette Frati, veniva organizzata per esempio la festa patronale, bastavano 4 telefonate, una, faccio un esempio, alla comunità in Canada, una alla comunità per esempio che stava negli Stati Uniti, un'altra alla comunità per esempio che stava da un'altra parte, e loro in maniera piramidale raggiungevano tutti quanti e praticamente si riusciva diciamo a interagire e a creare dei progetti in comune. Oggi con la quarta e la terza generazione è diventato tutto difficile perché loro sono americani oppure argentini, brasiliani eccetera, americani a tutti gli effetti e quindi è difficilissima una sorta di interazione diciamo mancano le occasioni poi per raggiungerli. Qual è l'atto pratico che noi abbiamo fatto per ricreare e ricostruire una rete? Allora, l'idea del museo è quella di raccontare innanzitutto delle storie. Quindi in ogni sezione del museo noi abbiamo una sorta di, chiamiamolo così, comò della nonna, col touchscreen sopra e dei cassetti sotto dove esponiamo diciamo del materiale che di volta in volta troviamo. Per quanto riguarda poi il touchscreen, noi dentro mettiamo, a parte diciamo le varie storie, i vari materiali eccetera, ma soprattutto alle terze generazioni noi chiediamo semplicemente di riempire dei questionari e darci delle informazioni sia degli antenati, materiale fotografico, documentazione eccetera, per costruire delle biografie anche piccole. Quindi al di là del personaggio famoso ci interessano anche i personaggi, persone anche che sono emigrate per esempio negli anni 60 per 5 anni e poi sono tornate, quindi si creano praticamente queste biografie. Succede che il pronipote è interessato a venire perché? Da un lato perché trova le informazioni del nonno e quindi trova dove è nato, il luogo e quindi ritrova tutto. però è interessato perché lui mette la sua biografia in quanto italiano all'estero e quindi diventa tutto un lavoro in evoluzione. Tutto questo poi ci permette, ecco, di ragionare meglio sui flussi, spiegare meglio dei dettagli e grazie alle informazioni,
Un paio di minuti.
sì, ricreare un pochino quello che è il contatto. Quindi questo è materiale che poi è utile per esempio per gli studiosi, per lavorarci sopra, perché poi escono fuori tante di quelle informazioni. Quindi facendo in questo modo riusciamo a prenderli singolarmente e metterli insieme, diciamo, metterli in rete, in una sorta di ragnatela simbolica. E in questo modo, ecco, questa è, diciamo, è l'opportunità che abbiamo. L'idea del museo poi qual è? Quello di estendere, il ragionamento che faremo è estendere questi touchscreen nei vari comuni, in modo che diventerà tutto un discorso dove ci sarà una sorta di interazione e di centralizzazione. Quindi l'idea, ecco, per recuperarli è proprio questo. Qual è un po' il limite, e mi aggancio anche al progetto per esempio Italea. Il progetto qual è? Quest'anno mi hanno chiesto, diciamo, una supervisione per il progetto Italea di San Donato e di Picinisco. Quello che abbiamo chiesto rispetto agli altri posti è, al di là del solito convegno o delle altre questioni che spesso, passatemi il termine, si riducono a fuffa perché si parla tanto, però poi di pratico con gli immigrati non si fa niente, abbiamo chiesto di limitare le spese per le manifestazioni pratiche, la festa, la sagra, eccetera, ma puntare di più sull'aspetto, diciamo, di informazione, soprattutto, ecco, lavorare molto sulla creazione di queste biografie e prendere più contatti reali e creare le storie degli emigrati e legarli di più al paese d'origine. Questo che cosa determina? Il fatto che è cambiata un po', le rubo un altro minuto così concludo, è cambiata un po' la percezione. Adesso il turista non arriva più, per esempio, semplicemente nel mese d'agosto per la festa patronale. Noi troviamo tanti italiani all'estero che vengono per esempio nei mesi di ottobre, nel mese di novembre, in altri periodi dell'anno. Quindi noi li intercettiamo e cerchiamo di dare anche quei servizi che servono, facendo anche dei progetti sperimentali per loro, tipo per esempio Officine Municipali, che è un progetto sperimentale del Lazio, dove abbiamo chiesto su quello che si farà in Valle di Comino di riservare una parte agli emigrati, cioè gli emigrati poi troveranno delle situazioni operative per loro, per esempio per il telelavoro, ma soprattutto per cose pratiche, perché avendo una seconda, una terza casa, chi può dargli per esempio in maniera rapida informazioni sulle tasse che vanno pagate, come vivono, oppure chi di loro vuole fare un investimento sul territorio, perché come l'esempio di Diciacca, che è partito, il nonno è andato, il nipote Cesito Diciacca è tornato e ha fatto un'azienda vinicola diciamo, di prodotti del territorio di altissima qualità. Quindi ecco, il futuro sta tutto lì, quello di cercare di intercettarli e in qualche modo metterli in rete e trovare poi la modalità per creare con loro delle possibilità anche di sviluppo nuovo sul territorio.
Ecco,
Grazie.
Messaggio passato. By way of conclusion of this most interesting panel, for which I thank very much all our four panelists, I would like to say something substantial, and I will say that in Italian so that Luca Leone would get the message straight. Nella mia esperienza di console generale negli Stati Uniti a Chicago, per i anni 2000, ho incontrato un personaggio che non esiste, non c'è più, e che ha fatto moltissimo, forse più di ogni altro, per la raccolta della documentazione dell'immigrazione italiana negli Stati Uniti d'America. Mi riferisco a Rudolph J. Vecoli, che ha creato il Centro per la documentazione sull'immigrazione in Nord America, un centro che riguarda essenzialmente l'immigrazione italiana e che è stato il frutto di una sua ricerca personale durata più di 30 anni. Lui che cosa faceva? Con la sua station wagon, ogni mese, ogni momento dell'anno, girava gli Stati Uniti, andando nei centri dove erano presenti comunità italiane, e raccoglieva la documentazione delle associazioni, quando ha fatto riferimento alle associazioni, portando tutto a Minneapolis. La sua richiesta, purtroppo rimasta inascoltata nei primi anni 2000, di avere un archivista professionale dall'Italia, non è stata accolta. Rimane però tutta la documentazione in questo centro di Minneapolis ed è auspicabile che un giorno, proprio alla luce di queste esigenze che lei ha sottolineato, venga messa a frutto, perché è un patrimonio di dati che serve. Prego.
Faccio un ultimo esempio, no? Un paio di giorni fa è venuta in Italia Jill Biden, moglie del presidente americano, quarta generazione, loro sono della provincia di Siracusa, doveva andare nel mondo arabo, una riunione di Messina. E qual è stata la cosa importante? Che prima di raggiungere la destinazione sua è scesa a Sigonella, ha visitato la cittadina dei parenti e poi è tornata indietro. Quindi quanta attenzione c'è da parte delle terze e quarte generazioni. Quindi l'importante è che ci siano delle proposte operative per loro, perché loro vanno molto sul pratico.
Bene, grazie a tutti. Thank you everybody. Sorry, I thought we were under pressure for leaving the room, but if nobody is chasing us from this room, the floor is open to. Why don't you move to the?
So I just wanted to add to your bibliography. There was a book that was published in the 90s, North of Naples, South of Rome, by Paolo Tullio, from the map's not there anymore, from Gallinaro. And the other thing was, I should say, my origins are from Sette Frati, so so this is great. This is wonderful. This is like going home. But also, there's a wonderful documentary that we showed at the Calandra Institute about 15 years ago called Chippers. I don't know if you've ever seen it. And it was about fish and chips in Scotland and Ireland, whatever. And back in 2009, Maria and I spent a week in San Donato because there's no hotel in Sette Frati, so we went to the Gran Casa in San Donato. And we got up in the morning, the first morning, and went out into the centro, and all you saw was fish and chips. There were these signs up, fish and chips, fish and chips, fish and chips. So I just wanted to add that to, and maybe we could, the other thing is, this past summer, Di Ciacca, they recreated the Borgo, one of the families, and I think you mentioned the winery, the Casa Vinicola, and they have an indigenous grape to the Valle di Comino, Maturano, and they're now developing wine from the indigenous grape. So I just wanted to add to the bibliography a little bit. We spoke about this last summer. Yeah.
Can you hear me? No, I just like to add Cecilia Di Ciacca. No, maybe you should stand. Yes, this is working. That Cecilia Di Ciacca is the brother of Mary Contini, because of course she took her husband's name. And yeah, you mentioned that apart from Maturano and the winery, also he created this what we call albergo diffuso. So he restored and bought some of the houses in the historical center of Picinisco. So he's, I would say, the ideal back migrant, okay, for the community, at least also from an economic point of view. Yeah.
No, it's wonderful what they're doing there in Ciacca.
Yeah, Ichaka. Yeah, it's really one. Yeah.
It's hard to get to Picinisco.
Yeah. We know.
We have another question from the floor, from the audience.
I was very struck that the first protagonist, the first
Yes.
He's very conscious of the poverty and the trap he wants to get away.
Yes.
By the third generation, by Mary Contini, the engagement is frankly sentimental. It's all about the beauty, it's all about the food. And in the other talks, we heard a real sort of intertwining of, you know, stories of the violence of the Second World War, the poverty that drove people out, the difficulties of life in Italy, and then the sort of happy re-engagement. Is this a matter of generations? Is it that you have to wait for the third generation to engage purely in the food and the beauty? Or is it more about the personalities of the protagonists, the authors?
Maybe both.
Yes. I don't think so. I mean, I think that it's also to do with the way they are writing. As regards Gagliardo Coraggioso, for example, he wanted to tell his story, and of course, that first part of his experience as a young boy, as a slave of this padrone, it was so traumatic for him that he never forgot about that part of his experience and wanted to share it with readers. Okay. As regards Mary Contini, well, she's a businesswoman. She's an icon. She's the symbol of Italianness in Edinburgh. So, of course, as Raffaella has already shown, from the point of view of the prefaces of the books, of the novels that she wrote, she wanted to say that at the beginning, trying to have a clear idea of her identity was very difficult. But then she became more and more proud of her roots, and she wanted to give this gift to her daughters. Now, of course, the way she sees the story of a family is more romantic, is more positive, because her intention is actually to give a positive message regarding the dignity of the community, and also make and reinforce the image that she has as a winner in life, also the director of a very important business in Edinburgh, and Italianness, so that this combination of writing and also receipts and recipes, and whatever. I mean, that is very important for her because she wants to be an icon, and she is. Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. But if you consider, for example, that also other members of the community were writing, I mean, I'm speaking, for example, about Anne Pia, who was born, whose family originally came from Picinisco, from Viticuso. Her idea of her roots was very, very negative at the beginning. I just quoted. There was too little time to give the whole story. But at the beginning, I mean, her experience was very hard, and Language of My Choosing was an Italian Scot memoirs, the Candid Life memoir. I mean, it was a sort of punch in the stomach because, I mean, as a Southerner, I am Sicilian. And it was very difficult for me to hear stories of the violence, subculture that she experimented when she was young. It was just at the end, after 7 years, that she actually decided that she wanted to rediscover the Italian part of her culture and identity and be proud of it. Thank you. You're welcome.
Another couple of questions. The lady first.
I was speaking English, so that's gone to the place where my roots came from quite some time down the line. I'm interested in, for the agendas, the various agendas that were in the kind of examination of these texts or the pulling together of these ideas, the responses and the considerations of the people there in those places who are and remain part of places that may be either quite depopulated or within the stories are quite complex, and that in the Italian context are still to be discussed in many ways. That's something that I regularly confront, so I'm interested in their perspective.
Is there any?
Yes, okay, I can try answering this question. Yeah, the reception of these works in Italy is not very popular, unfortunately. We were discussing this topic a couple of weeks ago with people from Picinisco and the Comino Valley, so local. I mean, language is a barrier in this case. We were thinking of also possibilities of translating these works from English into Italian to make them available for the locals and to disseminate these writings among the local community. On the other side, the good thing is that in Britain, they are getting popular attention. So the Italian British community is aware of this writing, that these writings exist. They read it, they buy it. So the problem is in Italy, so in the local community, but because of language. But translation might help in this purpose.